Hello there and welcome back, everybody. It's JP1970. Today, I'd like to bring you a different kind of video. Murder type mystery. A character commits some diabolical act and then what happened to them as a result. If you're new here, normally I do motorcycle videos, drone videos. I hope you'll try this out with me. A murder mystery story. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. I've got a doozy for you. A murder case that happened right here in Nevada. In fact, it happened right here in Elko, Nevada. In 1863, Elizabeth and Josiah Potts were married in Manchester, England. In 1865, they migrated to America, where Josiah could work for the Pacific Railroad Company. Elizabeth had 7 children during the course of their marriage. Only 2 of the children were still living with the family. That was Charles, who was 16, and little Edith, who was 5. Elizabeth was a large woman. Okay, she was around 200 pounds. She was known as being domineering, overbearing, and she had fair complexion and blue eyes. But she was a lot of woman. We'll just leave it at that. Josiah was kind of this rail thin, not very communicative. Elizabeth and Josiah were living in Elko, Nevada. Elizabeth, again, is a homemaker with the kids and taking care of the house. And Josiah was working for the Pacific Railroad. Now, guys, I need something to do here as I'm telling this story. So what I'm going to do is I am going to play a little solitaire. So let me get my cards set up. All right, so you got a little bit of an understanding of the characters. We've got Elizabeth and Josiah Potts. Josiah works for the railroad. He's a mild-mannered, kind of a quiet guy, and Elizabeth is this large, domineering woman weighing in about 200 pounds. Okay, so let me see if I can even remember how to do this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The Potts had a friend named Mr. Faucett. Mr. Faucett was a little bit older. He owned a ranch just outside of town, a little town called Carlin, which is about 23 miles away. And when Mr. Faucett would come to town, he would stop by and visit the Potts. I don't have anything. Oh, yeah, I do. Okay, all right. So, flip this over. That's an ace. I can move that up. And let's see, I can put that ace down. According to testimony, Elizabeth caught Mr. Faucett molesting their 5-year-old daughter. In a rage, they killed Mr. Faucett. Now, they would later swear that Mr. Faucett committed suicide, but we don't know. This was like the late 1800s. There's very little records of what actually happened. But according to the tale, as I understand it, and the research I was able to find, the Potts figured there's no way that anybody's going to believe that he committed suicide. So what they did was they cut him up into pieces, tried to burn up his remains in the furnace. The problem was that the smell coming from the house with this burning human flesh and everything was just so strong that they decided to stop doing that, and they just buried the rest of his remains down in the cellar. Let me see what I've got here. 1, 2, 3. So continuing the story, so what they decided to do was they decided to bury his remains in the basement, and then about a year later, they took off for Wyoming, and somebody else came in and rented the house that they had been living in. Man, I don't know if I just haven't played solitaire in a long time and I'm doing this wrong, or if I'm just Here we go. All right, we're going to get some stuff opening up here. Okay, so this new couple that moved into the old Potts house were known as Mr. and Mrs. Brewer. And they were just, I don't know what caused it exactly, but Mr. Brewer was down in the basement and he saw what looked like, still kind of freshly moved earth. So he took a steel rod, and he was kind of sticking it in the ground. Soon after that, the authorities were called out, and they discovered that it was the remains of old Mr. Faucett. And immediately suspicion centered on old Elizabeth and Josiah Potts, and an arrest warrant was issued, and they were called back to Nevada for questioning. The two were arrested on January 25th, 1889. For the death of Mr. Faucett. It gets worse. Naturally, when they were questioned about what happened and how the remains of the dead Mr. Faucett wound up in their cellar, they told them what happened. They caught him molesting their youngest daughter, and when they were talking to him about it, he committed suicide. They didn't think that anyone would believe that story, so they just buried him in the basement after they tried to cook his remains and get rid of them that way. Well, the courts were not having this. They just weren't buying this story at all. The jurors had a lot of trouble believing this explanation, and ultimately, two of the Potts children, Charles and Edith, were called to testify against their parents, and they gave kind of conflicting stories. So that didn't help at all. One of them said that the mother had killed Mr. Faucett. The other said Josiah, the father, had killed Mr. Faucett. So while all of this was going on, they were housed in separate cells, and Josiah pretty much kept to himself and didn't say too much. But listen to this, it gets weirder. Elizabeth tried to entice one of the jailers to get her pregnant so that she couldn't be sentenced to death. All right, I got a 10 here I can put on here. So ultimately, the jurors deliberated, and they found these two guilty. Mrs. Potts, Elizabeth Potts, she ordered a special dress be made all out of white, and her husband ordered a business suit for their public execution. She would be the first woman and the first and last woman ever executed by hanging in the state of Nevada. The day of the execution was June 20th, 1890. Elizabeth and her husband walked out to the gallows, which had been actually built in California and shipped to Elko. And Elizabeth was wearing her white dress. She had one red rose on her bosom. So according to legend or the story, it goes that these two, the nooses that were used, somehow got switched. And the noose that was put around Elizabeth's neck, when she was dropped, her neck broke immediately and blood squirted out completely all over her red dress. And her husband, unfortunately, when he was dropped through the trapdoor, he actually hung there, and it took almost 15 minutes for him to die. I don't know, there was something about a mix-up with the nooses, but there's more to the story, okay? There's more to the story. It turns out that what they found out later was that Mrs. Potts, Elizabeth Potts, was actually a bigamist, and she was married to Mr. Faucett previously, before she met Josiah Potts. And I guess she kind of grew tired of her new husband, Josiah, and she had been communicating with Mr. Faucett, and Mr. Faucett came to Elko to see Elizabeth. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing here with this game. Some question whether Josiah knew that they had been married or were still married. I don't know. There's still this kind of unknown that people still don't know. But this couple was taken and they were buried in the nearby Potter Cemetery. One last note about this case. In 1906, their graves were dug up and their bodies were found perfectly preserved and still under black shrouds, and they decided to move the bodies to unmarked graves. So now nobody in Elko really knows where those two graves are. Who knows? Were they really married? Did Mr. Faucett really molest the daughter? I don't know. There's a lot that we don't know about this story. But I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about it, this is the first and last woman that was ever hanged in the great state of Nevada. So, what do you think? How'd I do? That was my first tale of terror, and I'll be coming to you with these, hopefully, every Thursday. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for checking out this video, and please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll see you next time. Take care now. Bye-bye.